Vashti. Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be here with you and kick off day 2. First, I'd like to say yesterday's session was fantastic. I learned so much, and I was very much on a listening mode because I feel that the challenges you have laid out yesterday has created a fertile ground for my presentation today on the role of standards to build trust in the digital economy. So, the challenges that you outlined, I feel standards are part of the solution. They're not the only solution, particularly to address issues around digital trust, smoothing regulatory differences, and bringing agility to the regulatory framework. So over the next 20 to 25 minutes, I will introduce the policy context, review the barriers to digitalization and digital trade, outline the role of international standards, complementing regulation and legislation, and finally I'll conclude with some final remarks. Okay, so all right, so I have 5 trends or issues that sort of set the policy context for us. One is that there's an increase in digital services globally, but note the difference between the markets. 2 is that the digital economy is dominated by a few platforms, raising concerns around monopoly and inequality in terms of realizing the benefits of the digital economy between regions. 3, the developing world is being left behind. This was a challenge raised yesterday, the growing digital divide. And 4, as the World Economic Forum notes, one of the key challenges that we will be grappling with over the next 10 years is the issue of cybercrime and dealing with the fear of cyber inequality. So the global cost of attacks on cybersecurity has been $6 trillion in 2021, expected to increase by 15% per annum, to reach $10.5 trillion. And what does this do? It raises issues around global mistrust, discourages investment in countries with weak cybersecurity. And that brings me to my final contextual slide here, which is ITU's Global Cybersecurity Index. And the clear point here is that there is a need to bolster the cybersecurity of this region, to build trust, and to encourage investment and facilitate trade. So, going back to the World Economic Forum, as it notes, digital trust is the currency that facilitates future innovation. What is digital trust? It's being sure that your systems are secure, your digital ID and provenance is not breached, and cloud and interoperability is enabled. So, to improve digital trust, we need intentional and persistent trust-building initiatives. And that is exactly what the international standards infrastructure offers. So obviously, trust starts with regulation and legislation, but as you can see from this diagram, it varies tremendously across the world. 30% of countries do not have legislation in place to enable data protection. And to implement regulation and legislation, we need sound regulatory institutions. And as you can see, once again, there is a huge difference in terms of institutions in place to enable data protection and deal with cybersecurity issues. And there are fundamental different approaches to regulation. The approach taken by the EU is different to that of the US, China, for various reasons, including cultural differences and economic models. So the upshot of all of this is a rise in national and regional regulations, creating a fragmented regulatory policy framework. And this causes trade restrictions. So what do we need? As UNCTAD beautifully notes, we need a middle ground, a global data governance framework that creates neutral solutions, minimizing the risk, and this is what the international standard system once again offers. So I keep referring to the system, and it is a national, European, national, regional, and international system that exists. It is ready to be utilized. There are institutions in place that can really support and work with government representatives to build trust in this digital space. So at the international level, we have ISO, IEC, and ITU, and various US standards development organizations. Then at the regional level, taking Europe in consideration, we have CEN, CENELEC, and ETSI. And if we are to look at the Americas, we have COPANT, and to specifically focus on the Caribbean, we have a sub-regional standards body called CrossQ. And my colleague, Fulgence, is here from CrossQ. So if you have not spoken to him, please do. And CrossQ comprises of 15 national standards bodies from the region. So just talking about this system here, BSI is the British Standards Institution. We are a member of ISO, IEC, and CEN and CENELEC. And I'll outline to you what national standards bodies do, but in the context of the UK's national standards body. So we were the first national standards body to be created, and we are the founding member of ISO. What we essentially do is represent the UK's interests at European and international standard setting organizations. And our primary role is to support the development of trusted market frameworks in our economy through better industry practices, better regulation, and consumer protection. And how do we do this? By creating standards and encouraging their use to help improve the quality and safety of products, services, and systems. So the UK government and BSI agree that standardization is a key factor to support a number of government policies. I've listed a range of different areas, but essentially all parts of the economy. And standardization is able, when used in conjunction with legislation, to promote better regulation. So what is the value of the international standard system? Firstly, standards are voluntary, market-led, and needs-driven. They are developed when there is a gap in the market. They are developed by convening the ecosystem, diverse groups of experts. What we want is a balance of views around the standards making table. Standards, the legitimacy of standards comes through its development process. It goes through a deep consensus building process, the governance framework in place, and a public consultation process, which has been finessed over 122 years. We undergo systematic review to ensure the continuity and validity of standards, and standards can be supported through conformity assessment and accreditation to provide additional layers of assurance and trust. And ultimately, standards enable innovation. They do not stifle innovation, as many people falsely think. We have also developed fast-track standardization processes to keep up with the rapidly evolving digital space, if you will. So we have PASs, flexes, so there's a range of processes that we can leverage to support. And finally, standards can support regulatory policy and compliance with regulation. So in terms of trust, obviously regulation and legislation are absolutely fundamental, but on its own, it's not enough. What we need is deep engagement with the entire ecosystem. So this involves regulators, government institutions, quality infrastructure institutions, so standards bodies, accreditation bodies, metrology institute, consumers, and industry. And this is what the standard system enables. So standards can address three drawbacks of regulation and legislation. One being the political timetable. Regulation often does not keep pace with technology change, so it can be outdated. National barriers sometimes can create barriers to trade and market fragmentation, and standards can be referenced in regulation, and regulation rarely explains the how-to. But the good news is that standards can be referenced in regulations through numerous methods. And the benefits are that regulators can rely on the technical expertise of standards developers and save resources. They can expect broad acceptance of regulation because, people were involved in the standards development process. They can expect that it reflects the latest technologies and developments and ensure regulatory agility and smooth over regulatory differences. So as we were discussing yesterday, countries can set their own regulation, but if they reference international standards, then it smooths over those differences and can facilitate trade. So to summarize, international standards have a crucial role to play in the digital transformation process. It is not the be-all and end-all. It fits within a framework, and for a few reasons. Standards can can help build trust in the innovative application of digital technology. National standards bodies, so all of your countries have a national standards body, and when empowered, they can be conduits of excellence. They can drive change and work hand in glove with government to realize objectives. Certification schemes and trust marks. To build standards, so trust can be underpinned by standards, but in order to further that, certification schemes, accredited certification schemes that are built on standards furthers that. And finally, standards and certification have been increasingly being used in government procurement policy as a means to mitigate risk. And an example of that is that in the UK, if companies are wishing to bid for government contracts, they are increasingly requested to comply to 27001 when they're dealing with sensitive data, etc. You'll get the slide deck, but here are a few examples where the UK government is using international standards for this reason. Okay, so I hope that I have pricked your curiosity to consider standards going forward, but now into the real implementation part of it. In 2021, BSI did some research to understand the role of standards in supporting the digital transformation process. And we conducted some research together with CrossQ, which revealed that the uptake of international standards is very low in the Caribbean and also in Africa. And we wanted to understand a bit more why this is happening, and two clear reasons emerged. One is that there's a proliferation of standards in this space. We are not perfect either. And two, national standards bodies just do not have the capacity to engage effectively with their policymakers, and especially new ministries that they do not regularly engage with, such as the Ministry of ICT. So in order to address the first issue, BSI, together with international experts and our internal in-house expertise, we identified what are the top 5 standards to build national digital resilience, covering 4 key areas. 1 being information and cybersecurity, 2, protection of privacy, 3, digital ID and provenance, and the last one is interoperability and cloud. But standards alone are not enough. So building on that, what we need is that people and institutions have the capacity to actually make use of these standards and realize the benefits. So to that end, we developed a standards-based digitalization toolkit, and the objective is to demonstrate to government departments, national standards bodies, multilateral development banks, and the whole digital ecosystem how standards and national standards bodies can help build trust and provide confidence in the digital transformation process and facilitate digital trade. So the toolkit comprises of 2 key elements: a policy roundtable, which convenes senior stakeholders from government departments, regulators, so from a national digital economy, and make sure that they put a focus on international standards as a tool to complement regulation and legislation as an additional policy tool. And, by building this focus, the objective is to send their staff to a 4-day capacity building program on the importance of standards, where their key practitioners will understand and learn how to use standards. So I just want to highlight here that sorry, let me just go back, actually. Yeah, so we developed, I should highlight that we developed this toolkit with the advice of a high-level expert panel comprising of the UN, development banks, the Commonwealth Secretariat. Vashi, thank you so much for your time and your expertise from the legal side. National standards bodies, regional standards organization, just to make sure that this is not just the standards community, speaking to the standards community. We want to make sure that it really addresses your needs. And our work and the work of UNCTAD really highlights that standards do play an important part in the digital transformation process. I'm not sure if you're aware, but UNCTAD have an excellent policy tool called the E-Trade Readiness Assessment, which measures the readiness for countries to engage in the digital economy. And they look at 7 key policy areas. And they've incorporated standards into their policy tool. And I'll talk about the example of applying that tool in Kenya. So the results, basically they ran a survey and the results were very clear. The public and private sector in Kenya view international standards as an important tool in promoting trust in e-commerce. So for areas such as system security, it's as high as 89%. And furthermore, the stakeholders realize that skills on standards are important, are one of the top 5 issues or issues for skills development in order to really further the digital economy. And based on this, in collaboration with UNCTAD, the Digital Ministry in ICT, the Ministry of ICT in Kenya, the Trade Ministry, the UK government, and the National Standards Body in Kenya, KEPS, we ran a policy workshop with senior stakeholders from the digital economy in Kenya. So I've listed the different institutions there just so that you can see the range of people we convened to make sure that standards are considered in taking the digital economy forward. And the result of that was that the Kenyan stakeholders incorporated international standards in their national e-commerce strategy, and they recognized the need for capacity building. So with the support of the UK government and in collaboration with the National Standards Body of Kenya, we delivered a 4-day standards-based capacity building program to key practitioners from the digital institutions, and with the aim of creating a network of champions, standards champions in Kenya, so that they can support each other and really realize the benefits of standards-led growth. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is work with countries to go on this digital maturity road, regardless of where you're starting, be it basic or pioneering. And what we feel is that in order to really go down this path, national standards bodies and this, this quality infrastructure system really needs to be empowered and, brought to the forefront if we want to realize that value. Yes, and with all levers of change, it is important to monitor progress. And it is the best way forward here is to incorporate dynamic indicators into digital maturity indices. For example, I've listed the World Bank's Government Tech Maturity Index, which is great. However, it mainly focuses on binary indicators, and the uptake of standards and certification sort of brings more dynamism into the maturity indices, and also the indices that the scorecard that we heard about yesterday, IDS, I didn't see standards in there, but maybe there is an opportunity to explore that potential to really bring that dynamic element to measuring progress. So in conclusion, just to wrap up, international standards are an additional and agile policy tool that can complement regulation and legislation. There's an opportunity here for us to embed standards in policies, reference them in regulations, strategies, and digital maturity indices. Standards and the quality infrastructure system play a critical role in building trust, supporting governments and industry, Standardization can further and scale up innovation and help develop emerging and nascent markets. National standards bodies, or members of ISO, are naturally the neutral convener of the national ecosystem in a country and can provide a platform for collaboration to build upon and enhance existing international good practice. And this is all good and well, but we really need more awareness raising and capacity building of the public sector and the private sector to leverage this system and use it as a business tool and a policy tool in digitizing priority sectors. It's not just digital, the digital economy on its own, but it's the trade, financial services, healthcare. These standards can support all these areas. So with that, I would like to conclude. Thank you so much for your attention. If you have any questions, very happy to take it.
Thank you very much, Cindy. I find that's a great way to start the day. It's a very innovating presentation, so don't hold yourself back. Please feel free to ask any questions that you may have. I see a question on the floor.
Well, it was me. Hi, morning. Thank you for your presentation, Cindy. It was great. I just wanted to pick up on one small thing. I heard that you mentioned that in your analysis with Parokkil, with Fulgence, that you had identified a lack of capacity with the national standard bodies to engage with stakeholders. Mm-hmm. So the CCC was established via the RTC prior to the establishment of Parokkil. So part of our major mandate under consumer awareness is that we lobby with competent authorities mm-hmm. for standardization and for standards, because it's part of the consumer advocacy. So we continue to make that offer, that we will continue to do whatever is necessary to partner with the agencies, regional and international, to reach the consumer bodies. So I just wanted to put that on the table formally again. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning again. Cindy, excellent presentation. By the way, my name is Anson Robinson. I'm representing the Ministry of Financial Services in the Cayman Islands. So you mentioned Kenya as a success story. Do you have any similar success stories for countries within the region?
Not yet. So based on the UK government's priorities, there's a selected number of countries that we're working in at the moment, but we are looking forward to working in this region. And
how does a country, that's part two to my question, mm-hmm. how do we engage in getting our country in that list of that you just mentioned?
Please reach out to me and Parokkil, and we will see what we can do together. But thank you.
SG?
Thank you. Good morning. Rodney Taylor, CTU. You mentioned some of the factors as to why there wasn't more companies weren't going after or weren't internationally certified. I didn't see cost, though you mentioned capacity, but I didn't see, is that included in terms of the cost of actually getting these certifications, like the ISO, for example, that you mentioned, 27001, there's a cost to actually reaching that and maintaining that. So yeah. I didn't see that there mentioned specifically, but is that something that has been looked at?
That is something that certainly needs to be looked at. I mean, you hit the nail on its head, resources. It's not just human capacity, it's the financial resources. And that is something that we need to look into, and this is where we rely on partners and development banks to support us in that process. Thank you.
Hi, Simone Joseph Oliver, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So I'm from the Information Technology Services Department, and we currently follow the ISO 27001 that Mr. Taylor talked about, mm-hmm. and it is very expensive. Mm-hmm. So when he mentioned about the cost, I mean, I'm like, this is the same thing I'm thinking about now, because in as much as we would like to expand this standard to different governmental ministries, and apply other standards under ISO, let's say for the health section, etc., the budget is a constraint.
Yeah.
And we want other ministries to be following international standards as well. So I don't know how we can approach this in terms of getting funding or getting help from international donors, from CrossQ, who is right in our region. How can we get that additional support? And how can we encourage or bring awareness to other governmental ministries to see the importance of following and implementing international standards?
Absolutely, that's a great question. And I think the first step in all of this is raising the awareness and having clarity that standards are an important part of the equation. And once that is there, resources do follow. But I'm not saying that there is enough resources sitting there, to support certification. So, do get in touch, and we can talk about different ways we can explore opportunities for collaboration there and see if there are any opportunities to leverage potential funding to support that kind of activity from development banks. But I don't know if CrossQ, Fulgence, would you like to comment on that?
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. Right. So one of the things that I would advise St. Vincent and the Grenadines to do is to get in touch with your National Standards Bureau, right? CrossQ, the organization, what we do, we organize a number of projects, right, where we could give the necessary assistance in the development of the quality infrastructure. I know Cindy's presentation really focused on standards, but as she would have indicated during the presentation, it's not just about standards. You need the other quality infrastructure institutions to underpin the standards, right? She would have mentioned metrology, and we do give assistance to the National Metrology Institutes in the various member states to develop capacity. The same thing for conformity assessment, which is really crucial in terms of implementation of standards. So we could always talk to your director, Mr. Ezra Ledger, and he would contact us, and we try to develop projects to try to give the necessary capacity building to the NSBs and to promote quality infrastructure generally in member states, right? Is a real problem promoting, but first of all, we need to get to those policymakers, right? And so we always encourage the NSBs to engage the policymakers, engage government, because one of the things Cindy would have mentioned is the adoption of international standards. But to adopt international standards, you would have to be a member of the International Standards Institution, organization, right? But the NSBs always see it as being a very costly venture, right? To be a member of those organizations. So we always ask that they engage the policymakers, let the funding come from government. In fact, if the government understood the importance of quality infrastructure and the importance of a National Standards Bureau in facilitating the growth and development of the quality infrastructure, right, then they would give the necessary financial support to the institution. One of the things that we can always do is to show the importance, the cost benefit of implementation of standards. Yes, when you first implement or about to implement, it might be a little costly, but the benefits outweighs the cost. And that is what is important, to show the benefits of implementing standards and standards-related activity to institution to increase the competitiveness of business, right, and the general economic development of the member state. I think that's where we have to go, and we assist the members, we assist the National Standards Bureau in doing such. And we could always have a conversation during the course of this day, right, and see how we could approach the problem that you would have identified. Thanks.
Thank you for that. We do have one final question, and that is from our online audience. This is from Christopher Chinapu. Great presentation as usual, Cindy. There's also the argument that standards stifle innovation. What are your thoughts on how we can ensure that the benefits are derived?
Great question. I feel, well, as I mentioned in the presentation, standards do not stifle innovation because they allow you to realize the benefits of innovation through agile standardization processes. It's not about just realizing the value at the end, but there are agile processes to make sure that this, that one can realize the benefits at an earlier stage. And obviously, standards don't exist in a vacuum. There is intellectual property as well. So it's two sides of the same coin. And we need to just realize in order to further innovation, standardization is a critical element to that end. Thank you.
Actually, if I could just intervene here.
Yes, please.
To add something different. The fact that standards, like we see, promote innovation. Standards these days are not prescriptive, right? It is performance-based. And so you could come up with innovative ways to develop a product, but at the end of the day, the product have to perform in a particular manner. And so that's where the innovation aspect comes into play. So they don't tell you exactly how you must do that product, but how that product must perform at the end of the process. And that's where you could include innovation and in the standardization process. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cindy, for an excellent presentation. Let's give her a round of applause.